In a village where goats gossiped louder than the people, an old woman named Momankiru lived with her only daughter. The villagers swore Momankiru could hear secrets in the wind, and she believed every rumor came sharpened with teeth. One morning, as the goats sneezed dust into the sky, Momankiru received a strange dream. A voice told her that her daughter's tongue would one day destroy kingdoms. She woke sweating, clutching the air like a thief caught in daylight. The girl, Adiz, was only 5 then. Bright-eyed, quick with laughter, she loved to imitate birds until her throat ached. But Momankiru's fear weighed heavier than joy. Better silence than sorrow, the old woman muttered. And so she built a room of mud walls, no wider than 3 strides, and declared, "My child shall live here, where no tongue may harm the world." The villagers thought it strange, yes, but in a village where chickens were beads and drummers argue with thunder, strangeness was no enemy. They shrugged, whispered, and went on chewing roasted yam. But Adiz, locked behind the door, pressed her ear to the walls. She heard life like a festival she could not touch: drums, quarrels, laughter, births, deaths. Silence became her cradle, her playmate, her curse. At first, she screamed. Her fist bruised the walls. Her throat burned. But after months passed, her voice died like a tired fire. She learned to speak only with her eyes, her breath, her silence. Momankiru visited daily with food. She believed she was saving the world. Yet sometimes she looked into her daughter's face and saw not salvation, but a question she dared not answer. 15 years is a long time, and villagers grow fat on gossip. They laughed behind their hands. Momankiru keeps a daughter the way others keep goats. Some swore they heard Adiz humming when the moon was full, though no one had ever heard her voice. Some claimed she was half spirit already. And so legend grew taller than truth. One festival night, a traveling drummer entered the village. His drum was cracked, his voice drunk with palm wine, yet his rhythm carried power. Between beats, he shouted, "Beware the silent house. For when the mute one speaks, even rivers will forget their names." The villagers roared with laughter, tossing him groundnuts. But Momankiru shivered. The dream had returned. Adiz grew into a woman with skin like riverstone and eyes like thunder waiting for release. She waited, for what, even she did not know. Every night, she traced words she could not speak into the air. Every morning, her silence thickened, filling her chest like a second body. Fate, mischievous as a trickster hare, sent a suitor to Momankiru's heart. A young farmer, Ugana, whose muscles were praised even by jealous husbands, knocked one morning. "I have heard," he said, "that you keep a daughter hidden. I wish to see her." His grin was wide, his confidence wider. Momankiru's broom answered him on the head before her mouth did. That night, Adiz laughed silently into her mat. The suitor's foolish courage warmed her more than firewood. For the first time in years, she felt her chest tremble with a joy almost like sound. But Momankiru sat outside, staring at the moon. She wondered, had she built a wall to protect the world, or a prison to destroy her child? The village prepared for the Festival of Tongues, where everyone boasted, lied, and sang until their throats ached. The irony was salt on Momankiru's wound. That night, Adiz pressed her lips to the wall and whispered for the first time in 15 years. The sound was not human. Not animal. It was something else. The mud shivered. The goat outside sneezed twice. The next morning, Momankiru awoke to find cracks in the mud wall of Adiz's room. Thin, trembling cracks like veins on an old palm leaf. She pressed her ear to them. From inside came not words, but a hum, low, rhythmic, neither song nor prayer. It stirred her bones, as if the earth itself were remembering something it had forgotten. Children playing nearby stopped their games. They heard the hum and froze, mouth sticky with mango. "She is talking," one shouted. Soon a small crowd gathered outside the hut, pressing ears against the wall, giggling nervously. But the sound was not laughter, not crying. It was something deeper, something that made the hairs on their arms stand straight. Mom and Kiru scattered the crowd with a peso, cursing them back to their mothers. She shut the door tightly and sat before it all night, whispering prayers like cracked shells. "Silence, child," she begged through the wood. "Do not call what I buried." But inside, Adi's lips moved against her will, as though the silence of 15 years had chosen its own time to break. Ugana, the bold farmer, returned again, this time with roasted plantain in his hands as an offering of peace. "Mama Nkiru, I mean no harm. But the market women say your daughter sings without words." Mama Nkiru snatched the plantain and threw it to a goat. "Better goats eat your foolishness than my ears hear it," she snapped. Yet she noticed Adi's shadow stretching longer against the wall, listening. That night, a hyena laughed too close to the village. The elders said it was a bad omen, but the children said the hyena laughed in rhythm with Adi's hum. Mom and Kiru tried stuffing her ears with cotton, but still she heard it, that strange, rising language that roared like distant drums. She wondered if the dream was no warning but a prophecy now waking. At dawn, Adis whispered a word. Just one. The walls shook. The goat tethered outside sneezed, farted, and fainted. Mom and Kiru's eyes bulged. "Stop it," she cried. But Adis only pressed her palm to her lips, as though even she did not understand what her tongue had given birth to. News spreads faster than fire in dry grass. Soon the elders demanded to know the truth. They gathered at Mom and Kiru's hut, their walking sticks like spears of judgment. "She has spoken," Mom and Kiru admitted, trembling. "But it is no turn I know." The elders argued, some calling for rituals, others for patience. One simply muttered, "If goats faint, it cannot be good." They brought a linguist from the next village, a man who claimed he could translate even bird songs. He bent low to listen through the crack in Adi's wall. When Adi spoke again, his eyes rolled white, and he collapsed in the dust. The villagers dragged him home, while his wife wept that he now spoke only in riddles about rivers walking on two legs. The festival of tongues arrived again. The drummers beat, the singers sang, the liars lied with pride. But in the middle of the celebration, Adi's voice carried out of her hut. It was a chant, long and deep. The drums faltered. The singers stammered. Even the liars forgot their lies. The whole village turned toward that single hut, where silence had once lived. The next morning, the river that flowed past the village was no longer a river. It had curled itself into knots, standing still like a coiled snake. Fish flopped on the mud, gasping. The villagers wailed, declaring Adis had cursed the waters. But Adis herself sat calmly behind her wall, humming to herself in the language no one knew. Mom and Kiru wept into her hands, realizing silence had not saved the world, it had only delayed its reckoning. The villagers stormed Mom and Kiru's hut with accusations sharper than machetes. "You hid a witch in silence," they shouted. "Now the river has knotted itself like a fisherman's net." Mom and Kiru raised her hands in defense, but her voice cracked like old wood. "I only tried to protect you," she cried. Yet the crowd spat dust at her feet. Protection sounded too much like betrayal. Through a small crack in her wall, Adis watched. She saw faces twisted with fear, lips spitting curses she could not answer. For 15 years she had been a ghost to them, now she was a monster. But she did not weep. Her silence had trained her to be stone. Inside her chest, however, something hot and restless pulsed, the hunger of words not yet born. The eldest of the elders, Papa Obina, raised his staff and declared, "The girl must be brought out. Let us hear this tongue ourselves." Mom and Kiru fell to her knees. No, if she speaks before all, the sky may break." But her pleas were drowned by the rumbling agreement of the crowd. The staff struck the ground. The judgment was final. At dawn, the men of the village gathered with hammers, ropes, and nervous laughter. Momankeru clung to the door, wailing. But wood, no matter how faithful, cannot resist forever. With a final crack, the door gave way, and light poured into Adi's prison for the first time in 15 years. Adi stepped out slowly, blinking against the sun. Her hair flowed wild as river wheat, her skin pale from years without light. The villagers gasped. She looked less like a girl, more like a spirit borrowed from the forest. Yet her eyes burned alive. She did not look at them with fear but with the quiet curiosity of someone finally seeing the world she had only imagined. Ugana, bold as ever, stepped forward with a sheepish grin. "No, Adis," he greeted. "Welcome." Adis tilted her head, studying him like an unusual insect. Then she opened her mouth. The sound that emerged was neither greeting nor insult, but a strange cascade of tones that twisted the air like smoke. Immediately, 3 women fainted. One elder dropped his staff and began clapping like a child. A goat gave birth to twins on the spot. The crowd screamed. Some fled toward the forest. Others fell to their knees, shouting prayers. Momankeru covered her ears, rocking back and forth, whispering, "I told you, I told you, I told you." But Adis did not stop. Her words rolled out like drums that beat from the inside of the earth. Her voice bent the branches of trees, rattled cooking pots, and made the river uncoil itself slowly, flowing backward upstream. The villagers stared in awe and terror. This was no ordinary tongue. This was a language that commanded the world itself. One brave, or foolish, man shouted above the chaos, "We should crown her queen. If her tongue can move rivers, she can move kingdoms." Another spat dust in fury. "And when her tongue moves to destroy us all, better bury her mouth forever." The crowd erupted into argument, half hungry for power, half trembling with dread. Adis listened to them bicker, the sound of their fear sweeter than palm wine. Then, for the first time in 15 years, she smiled. It was not the smile of a child. It was the smile of someone who had discovered her cage was never strong enough, and that the world outside was far easier to break. The villagers split into 2 camps overnight. One side called Adis a goddess, the other a curse. They quarreled so loudly that chickens stopped laying eggs, out of sheer annoyance. Papa Obina sighed, "Never in my long life have I seen people argue so much they forget to eat." Yet the truth burned in him. The girl's voice carried power greater than their drums, their songs, even their prayers. Momankeru knelt before Adis, clutching her daughter's hands. "Child, swallow your tongue. Bury it deep again. Do not let the world twist you into a weapon." Adis looked at her with pity, as though the woman before her were no longer mother but jailer. And in a voice that made the wind bow its head, she answered, "It is too late." To prove her power harmless, some villagers brought burning coals. "If our words are true magic," they said, "let her speak and quench this fire." Adis whispered one syllable. The flames hissed, then rearranged themselves into the shape of a rooster that crowed thrice before vanishing into smoke. Half the crowd cheered. Half screamed and ran for the hills. That night, the hyena laughed again, closer this time, as though mocking their confusion. The elders muttered that the trickster spirits had chosen a new mouthpiece. Ugana, foolish yet brave, declared, "If spirits gave her power, then let us learn their language through her. Why fear what we might control?" His words planted seeds of greed in many ears. The council of elders gathered in secret. If the girl's tongue can bend rivers and flames, imagine what it could do against rival villages, one whispered. But Papa Obina, oldest of them all, struck the floor with his staff. "Fools! A tongue that can command the world cannot be commanded by men. Mark my words, it will command us." Adis, alone in her hut, dreamed. In her dream, she spoke, and mountains bowed. Rivers danced backward. Kings tore off their crowns and placed them at her feet. When she woke, she tasted salt on her lips, as if the ocean itself had licked her mouth. She smiled. Her tongue was no longer her own, it was destiny. At dawn, Momankeru confessed before the village. She told of her dream 15 years ago, the warning that her daughter's tongue would destroy kingdoms. The villagers gasped, some with fear, some with excitement. If she is meant to destroy kingdoms, Ugana grinned, then let her start with the kingdom that taxes our yams. The crowd roared with laughter, though Momankeru wept bitterly. Already, a group of villagers began following Adis, calling her Nwoni Nk Oku, woman of words. They offered her yams, goats, even their jewelry, bowing whenever she passed. Adis said nothing, but when she laughed, palm trees shivered, dropping ripe nuts to her feet. Her followers cheered. The rest of the village trembled. One evening, as lightning stitched the sky, Adis stood before the villagers and spoke a string of words none could understand. The storm obeyed. The lightning bent low, striking the ground in spirals, dancing like masqueraders. The rain poured, then reversed, flying back upward into the clouds. The villagers screamed. Some called her goddess. Others called her death. Unable to bear it, Momankeru tore her wrapper and fell to the ground, cursing her own womb. O gods, why give me a daughter only to make me mother of ruin? Adis looked at her mother with strange calm. Then she whispered a word that no one understood. Momankeru froze, her lips sealed shut. The woman who had silenced her child for 15 years was silenced in return. Word of Adis' strange tongue traveled faster than harmattan wind. One morning, a royal messenger arrived, his horse foaming, his wrapper stained with dust. The king has heard, he announced, that a girl here commands rivers and storms. He demands her presence at once. His eyes flickered with both fear and greed. The villagers erupted into argument. Some shouted, "Let her go. If the king favors us, we'll prosper." Others snarled, "Send her away and rid us of this curse." Papa Obine shook his head, muttering, "When the crocodile invites you to swim, do not dive in with joy." But the younger men only dreamed of titles and rewards. For days, Adis remained silent, ignoring the pleas, the bribes, the curses. Finally, she stood before the people, her voice soft but heavy. "I will go. Not because of your kin. Not because of your greed. But because my tongue has been caged too long. Let the world hear me." The earth itself seemed to bow in agreement. The palace was wide as a horizon, dripping with gold and cowries. Courtiers gasped when Adis entered, her bare feet tracing dust on polished stone. The king, fat with yam and pride, leaned forward on his stool. "So this is the girl who bends rivers. Speak, child, and prove your worth." His voice was thick with hunger, not for truth, but for power. Adis spoke a single word. The king's crown slid from his head, turned into a turtle, and crawled away. Courtiers shrieked. Drummers dropped their sticks. The king's jaw hung open like a broken door. Then Adis smiled. "Shall I continue?" she asked. The king's fear was drowned only by his greed. "Yes," he cried. "Continue until the world itself kneels." The king's gestures, terrified but desperate to please, tried to mimic Adis' strange sounds. One burped mid-syllable, another sneezed, and both were immediately turned into chickens. The court roared with laughter, even Adis chuckled. But beneath the comedy, the air was sharp with danger. This was no entertainment. This was power unchained. Momankeru, still mute from her daughter's curse, wept silently in the shadows of the court. Her hands clawed the earth, begging the gods for mercy. She had wanted to protect the world from her daughter, now the world wanted to own her. And the girl she once cradled no longer looked like a daughter, but like destiny walking. In secret chambers, the king's advisers whispered. If she can command storms, she can topple thrones. Today she bends for him, but tomorrow she may bend him instead. They plotted poison, daggers, chains, forgetting that no weapon is sharper than a word that reshapes reality. The king held a great feast in Adi's honor. Drums pounded, dancers spun, meat roasted on every fire. Yet every eye watched her mouth, as though waiting for a word to turn yam into stone or wine into blood. Adis remained calm, chewing slowly, speaking nothing. But when a servant tripped and spilled palm oil on her leg, she whispered one syllable. The stain vanished, the servant grew wings, and the crowd screamed with awe. Rumors spread to neighboring lands. Other kings, jealous and afraid, began sharpening spears and forging alliances. If the girl's tongue bends reality, then whoever owns her voice owns the world, they whispered. But Adis belonged to no one, not even to herself. Her words were wild spirits, roaming wherever they pleased. The villagers back home quarreled endlessly. Some praised Adis as savior, others cursed her as doom. The river still flowed backward, crops grew in spirals, and goats recited proverbs at dawn. Life had become a folktale in itself. One child asked her mother, if Adis sneezes, will the sky fall? The mother slapped her gently. Hush! Do not give the gods ideas. Meanwhile, Momankeru wandered the palace gardens, her silence heavier than chains. She watched her daughter from afar, adored by courtiers, feared by kings. Each night, she dreamed of the little girl who once hummed like birds. Each morning, she woke to a woman who could unmake the world with laughter. News spread like wildfire. Neighboring kings, jealous and afraid, marched with their armies to confront the girl who could command rivers and flames. They feared her more than drought, more than war. Soon, the horizon was thick with banners, shields, and drums. Yet Adis, barefoot and calm, stood before them with nothing but her mouth. Speak for us, demanded one king, and we will crown you ruler of all lands. Speak not, threatened another, and we will cut your tongue from your mouth. Adis tilted her head, as though deciding whether to laugh or sigh. She did neither. She simply opened her lips, and the winds bowed low. Her voice roared out like thunder wrapped in silk. Swords bent like yam stalks. Shields melted into puddles. Drums burst into silence. The armies dropped to their knees, trembling. What was war to a woman whose syllables could shatter iron? In the chaos, Momankeru crept forward, her hands shaking. Though her tongue was sealed, her eyes screamed. She fell before Adis, clutching her daughter's ankles. For the first time, Adis looked shaken. She whispered a word, and her mother's lips parted again. But when Keru tried to speak, her voice was gone, her throat offered only air. Realizing her tongue was gone forever, Momankeru took another path. She reached for a stone, heavy and sharp. Tears blurred her vision, but her arms did not falter. Forgive me, child, her eyes pleaded. And with all her strength, she struck, not at Adis, but at herself. The woman who had caged silence embraced it forever. For the first time since she was 5, Adis screamed. Not in strange syllables, not in power, but in raw, human anguish. Her cry cracked the sky. Lightning split mountains. Rivers evaporated into steam. The kings and armies fled in terror, leaving only dust behind. But Adis knelt over her mother's body, her face soaked in a grief no language could command. The world around her began to unravel. Without restraint, her voice spilled out in waves, reshaping everything. Trees grew upside down. Goats spoke proverbs. The moon fell briefly into the river, then leapt back into the sky. The villagers wailed, "She is ending the world." Yet Adis no longer cared. She whispered her sorrow, and mountains wept in rain. From the forest came the hyena's laugh, louder than ever. Some swore it was no hyena at all, but the trickster spirit who had whispered in Momankiru's dream long ago. Silence or speech, it makes no difference, the laughter seemed to say. A tongue caged too long becomes sharper than any blade. Addis carried her mother's body to the riverbank. For a long time she sat, her lips trembling with unshed words. Then she spoke one final syllable. The river shivered, then flowed again, but not backward, not in knots. It flowed gently, as though sighing in relief. The land grew still. The world exhaled. When dawn broke, Addis was gone. Some said she walked into the river and became water. Others swore she turned into wind, traveling with every whispered secret. The village rebuilt, but none forgot. To this day, when a child is too quiet, mothers warn, careful. Silence has a tongue sharper than thunder. And somewhere, perhaps in the rustle of leaves or the laugh of a hyena, Addis' language still lingers, waiting for ears brave enough to hear it.